You didn't think I'd come without props, did you? Actually, I've been wearing this since we got through with Thanksgiving, and it was kind of amazing how many people who normally were devastated and were not smiling would come up and acknowledge the snowman or the Santa Claus, or my favorite was the tree, and they'd say, "You've got a tree on your head," and I'd say, "Yes, please don't cut it down." I will take this off, however, for the lesson. My dad's tap dance shoes. Mom's Disney collection. My parents' wedding rings. My old Army uniforms and medals. My LP collection. These were just a few of the items that people have mentioned to me as they explained the things that they had lost in the fire that could never, ever be replaced. It was the things that held cherished moments, cherished memories for each of them. What would you miss? What would you have to leave behind? I was reminded of the things that I had quickly packed the first night of the fire as Carolyn and Rich in my neighborhood were evacuated abruptly. My dad's cowboy hat, family pictures, my Science of Mind text, a picture of Jesus that I've had since college. Clothes went in last. They could easily be replaced. My priorities in life were very clear from the choices that I had made. At least I had time to choose. Since the Sunday after the campfire began, I have worked in some capacity as a Chico Police Department chaplain. There have been death notifications, ride-alongs in burned-out areas with police officers, prayers with fire crews, searches with coroners for the recovery of bodies, hugs for search and rescue teams, and most prominently recently, working at the FEMA and DNA Family Services Center since it is opened. I have seen more people experiencing grief and loss in the last 3 weeks than I have in the last 12 years as a police chaplain. Just as a reminder, grief has many stages. The stages have many names, but grief basically includes shock, denial, pain, anger, depression, and ultimately acceptance of the situation. Trauma has many similar stages. It includes fear and anger, sadness, numbness, and anxiety. All of those met grief in the last 3 weeks. Certainly this thing called the campfire was a major trauma for over 57,000 residents of our Butte County. The Sunday after the fire began, I was asked to help with a death notification of 3 children, 8, 12, and 17. Their father, their grandmother, and the 3 dogs were assumed to have perished since they found their bodies in the front yard. The children had been evacuated from school. DNA samples were needed to confirm that indeed the father and the grandmother were dead. The temporary guardians, chaplains, and an investigative detective met first to decide how was it best that we would approach these 3 children. The guardians were their neighbors and had helped to care for the children through the years. As we met, we established the best approach to share this terrible news. The oldest son, the 17-year-old, came first. Methodically and transparently, we told him of the situation. Not surprisingly, he denied it. This young man demanded that we give him pictures, that we take him up immediately to see it, and he wanted to know why. When asked how we could help, his flippant response was, "Buy me a Ferrari." His anger was showing. As he left the room and we began to talk with the other two children, the 8 and 12-year-old, he immediately grabbed his phone and began to text and call his father. This did not cease for the next hour. His response was indeed one of shock and denial. Many people I spoke with held out hope that their home was still standing. Some were anxious to return to really see proof that it was gone. No two people react the same to this tragic fire, just as no two people will ever react the same to grief. People were stumbling for the first couple of weeks. Shock was evident as they walked around numb. In some instances, it felt like being in the FEMA center with the walking dead. Fear was also apparent in especially senior citizens. More than once I talked to 80, 85, 79-year-olds who had lived on $800 to $900 a month. They had originally paid for their mobile home, but their space was $400 a month, and they couldn't afford to buy insurance. They had lost it all. Everything was gone, and they questioned how they would survive in the years to come. At 80, it's tough to start over again. Fear had definitely set in. I carried Kleenex with me in my pocket as I walked the FEMA center because I never knew when the tears would begin to flow. For some, all I had to do was ask, "How are you doing?" and they would start to cry. Sometimes someone would come up and grab me and shake me and say, "Please give me prayer," and the tears would flow. Other times they claimed, "I'm in PTSD, where do I go?" The pain of the loss was so overwhelming. For some, nothing seemed to comfort them. Others remained in that state of numbness. One woman arrived at the DNA center, and as a chaplain, I was always asked to come into the room where they did the DNA testing to be with the individuals as the process occurred. She was alone, and so I sat next to her. She had come to help identify her father's body. I asked her if she was sure he was gone. "Oh, yes, I'm sure he's gone." I sat in the car and screamed and yelled at him as he ran back into the house to get the dog. And then the unthinkable happened. The roof collapsed. She kept screaming for him to come, but it was hopeless. She tried to drive away, but the tires had already melted, and so she got out of her car and she ran. She sat at the table with her mouth wide open as the officer swabbed the inside of her cheeks. This would be the only way to identify her father's remains. I tried to comfort her as best as I knew how. Did she have a place to stay? Yes. No, she had lost her job. That too had burned down. She wasn't sure she'd stay in the area. No tears were shed, or maybe she had cried them out already for now. She was on autopilot, something I frequently experienced. This would be how she would make it through the day, in total numbness. The Butte County Board of Education had received backpacks from several other districts. I think we gave out a total of about 500 or 600. Any school-aged child that did not have a backpack was entitled to pick a new one. Some were stuffed with pajamas or T-shirts, others had school supplies, some even had coloring books and crayons and stuffed animals. Often while the parents were waiting to begin the process at the FEMA center, I would walk up and ask the kids, "Do you have a backpack?" And when they said no, I would say, "Would you like a new one?" And they'd say, "Oh, yes." And then, of course, a different dynamic began to happen. Sometimes the kids didn't want to leave their parents. Other times the parents didn't want their child to leave. And then they would see me in my badge and my uniform, and they would let them go because their child was going to get something. In one family, there was a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old girl. A sophomore, the boy was, and a fifth grader, the girl was. While the girl was gregarious and outgoing and very willing to talk, the boy pretty much stayed silent and only said, "Yes, ma'am," "No, ma'am." He was tall and he still had a little bit of baby fat, and of course his lip was covered in peach fuzz. We walked to the booth deeper in the Sears there, the old Sears Center, and as we greeted staff, the kids were allowed to walk behind the desk or the table and pick out their new backpacks. We returned to the FEMA entrance, and they sat down between their mother and their father. They immediately unzipped the bags and began to pull out the items that were in there. They were stuffed with binders and pencil bags and crayons and coloring books. And the girl discovered her white teddy bear first, and she set it aside quickly. She was more interested in the school supplies that remained there. The boy pulled out his brown teddy bear. Now, mind you, this was a large young man. Would he like me to take it back and give it to another child? "Oh, no," he said forcefully, as he clutched that teddy bear to his heart. There he was, this big burly kid on the verge of manhood, allowing himself to be comforted like a child. The fire had taken so much from the children. There was sadness and pain, and so many of them. Parents felt overburdened with their own grief, and they often didn't know how to help their own child. Joseph Francis Argazzi once stated, "Don't surrender your grief too quickly. Let it pierce the soul. Let it wail and crack open wide the disbelief, allowing its searing tears to stain your face. Something is missing in my heart tonight. It has made my gentle eyes soft with sorrow, while my angry voice turns into a whispered prayer, and my tender need of absolution so clear." Not only are the residents of Paradise and Magalia and Concow in grief this day, we are all experiencing stages of grief. And the support systems that normally would help those from the burned out areas, the churches, the friends, the neighbors, the co-workers, have been scattered to the wind. They're in Texas, they're back east in the south, they're in San Francisco, they're Oregon, they're scattered. While we here in Chico have opened our hearts, our homes, our communities to thousands of people, we have become their support. And now some of us are frustrated that the lines at the grocery store are too long. The parking spaces are limited, and we can't get across town as fast as we once did. And the police have noticed the increase in honking horns. Anger is beginning to show in the evacuees and the Chicoans. Chicoans grieve for the friends they have lost, either by death or by moving. We grieve for the homes on the hills that we grew up in. We are angry and frustrated that our town feels overcrowded. Because of our beliefs, however, we know there is no separation between us and them. We are all one in consciousness. We are united in love. And this morning, as I sat outside of Kathy's office, I got up to read the poster or the statement that she had, and here it said, "Beloveds, remember we are in this together. One God, one perfect idea. There you are, here am I. One, one, one. We are one mind. We are in this together. We are in this together." I am reminded of that day when I hear from my neighbor, who is a palliative care nurse, about her clients who nearly didn't make it, or those who died because they were so physically damaged that they were unable to get out. She is sad for the loss of her clients, and yet she lives in Chico. Or from a nurse friend who works at a prompt care, and the clients who have lost everything and now they are succumbing to illnesses. Or the clerk who helps find someone new clothes, or your coworker who has lost everything. We cannot not be affected by this challenge. Joel Goldsmith tells us we cannot be separated from God because there is no we. Actually, there is no such thing in all the world as you or me as individuals standing alone. God being infinite. God is all there is. God constitutes you and me. God constitutes our life, our mind, soul, and being, just as gold constitutes the rain. God is the essence of our being, the life, soul, mind, spirit, law, continuity, and activity. We indeed are one with the new citizens who have come to our community seeking refuge and help. We know we are one because God is all that there is. So just how will we experience the changes and the grief in the months and the years to come? Dr. Jim Lockhart, author and Science of Mind minister, recently wrote about his experience of grief when his daughter died in a tragic car accident. I'd like to share some of the points that he made about grief because I think they are so pertinent to today. First, spiritual maturity is the ability to face whatever comes along in life from a place of realization that it's all divine. That means that much of what happens is a mystery. So many times as a chaplain, I've been asked the question, why did someone die? Why did something happen? Those questions cannot be answered. As Jim puts it, there are aspects of reality at play that we have absolutely no understanding of. There will be those we will work with and encounter in the weeks and months ahead that do not have a spiritual maturity. Bless them. Be an example of love. Perform an act of kindness, a smile or a hug. It is through your ability to honor our oneness that they may come to a place of greater unity with others and to know that they are loved even in this time of tragedy. Let yourself grieve and allow others to grieve. I remember when my brother died, I was so busy taking care of his 2 teenage children as well as my parents that were devastated that I stuffed my feelings. Besides, I was tough. I could handle it. It ultimately came back to bite me big time, and the hurt was even greater and longer. More than once these last few weeks, I have encouraged others to cry and allow themselves the experience to experience their feelings that they're having in that moment. Stick with it, as Jim says. It has a bottom, but it does not end. When people to return to what was once their home, when they begin to sift through the ashes in hopes of finding something, and the realization truly hits them as to what they've lost, the numbness and the hurt will sink in even deeper. They will not return to normal overnight, just as their support system, will be challenged by their mood swings and overwhelming feelings of grief. Grief has no time limit. There is no magic wand that we can pick up and make it all better right here, right now. It will come and it will go, and it will come again. It does, however, become manageable. I still at times mourn the loss of my brother, and he transitioned 27 years ago this month. Try to have compassion for those who try to comfort you and others. People really are well-meaning. Comments like it was only stuff are not helpful. One woman told me a couple of days after the fire that she was told that she should smile. It was over with. She had had a near-death experience as flame blocked her exit from both sides, and she was with several other people. She was not capable of smiling at that moment. I really explained that her friend was only trying to help and really didn't know how. When all else fails, simply say, I am so, so sorry. Remember, those of us who did not go through this, however, also face our own fears, because at any moment it could happen to us. Look what happened in Santa Rosa. And our neighborhood was salvaged by a backfire that was only about a mile or a mile and a half away. Compassion and love is really the answer, and Kathy already touched upon it. Not only for others, but for yourself. Often as I posted my experience of the campfire on Facebook, I would close with, be sure to hug your family and let them know how much you love them. Don't forget to include the four-legged family members as well. Do this not out of fear or a feeling of loss, but rather out of a determination to live in a greater joy in this moment right here, right now. Joan Didion, in her book, The Year of Magical Thinking, stated, "We think that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem. But the truth is that things really don't get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and they fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this. In our oneness, our unity, may we all have room to honor our grief and the challenges it brings. Coming together, falling apart. Coming together, falling apart, as we support each other in the years to come. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is."